Margaret Tudor was born on November 28, 1489 in the Palace of Westminster in London to King Henry VII and his wife, Elizabeth of York. She was their second child and firstborn daughter. Her siblings included Arthur, Prince of Wales, the future King Henry VIII, and Mary, who would briefly become Queen of France. Margaret was baptized in St. Margaret's Westminster on St. Andrew's Day. She was named after Margaret Beaufort, her paternal grandmother, Countess of Richmond and Derby. When Margaret was 8 years old, she became betrothed to King James IV of Scotland, whom was in his 20s. Many in the English court were opposed to the match, as it would bring the Stuarts of Scotland a possible line to the English succession. King Henry VII was noted to have said in response, "What then? Should anything of the kind happen, and God avert the omen, I foresee that our realm would suffer no harm, since England would not be absorbed by Scotland, but rather Scotland by England, being the noblest head of the entire island, since there is always less glory and honor in being joined to that which is far greater, just as Normandy once came under the rule and power of our ancestors, the English." On January 24, 1502, Scotland and England concluded the Treaty of Perpetual Peace, the first peace agreement between the two realms in over 170 years. The marriage treaty was concluded the same day and viewed as a guarantee of the new peace. Margaret, who was still a child, remained in England, but was now known as Queen of Scots. Margaret and James IV had 6 children, though only one of them reached adulthood. Their marriage linked the royal houses of England and Scotland, which a century later resulted in the union of the crowns. Following the death of James IV at the Battle of Flodden in 1513, Margaret as Queen Dowager was appointed regent to their son, King James V. A pro-French party took shape among the nobility, urging that she would be replaced by John, Duke of Albany, the closest male relative to the infant king. In seeking allies, Margaret turned to the Douglases, and in 1514 she married Archibald Douglas, 6th Earl of Angus, which alienated other powerful nobles and saw her replaced as regent by Albany. Albany arrived in Scotland in May 1515 and was installed as regent in July. His first task was to get custody of James and Alexander, politically essential for the authority of the regency. Margaret, after some initial defiance, surrendered at Stirling in August. For some time, her brother Henry VIII had been urging her to flee to England with her sons, but she had steadily refused to do so, fearing such a step might lead to James's loss of the Scottish crown. Her marriage to Angus was at its lowest point. Once writing to her brother, King Henry VIII, "I am so troubled with my Lord of Angus since my last coming into Scotland, and every day more and more, so that we have not been together this half year. I am so minded that, and I may by law of God and to my honor, to part with him. For I wit well he loves me not, as he shows me daily." Margaret remained an Englishwoman in attitude and outlook, and at root. She genuinely desired a better understanding between the land of her birth and her adopted home. As such, necessity demanded an alliance with Albany and the French faction if she was to maintain her standing. But no sooner was Albany off the scene than she set about organizing a party of her own. In 1524, the regent was finally removed from power in a simple but effective coup d'etat. With Albany once more in France, where he was to die in 1536, Margaret, with the help of Arran and the Hamiltons, brought James, now 12 years old, from Stirling to Edinburgh. It was a bold and popular move, removing the veil and presenting James V as the rightful King of Scots. Margaret received papal approval to divorce from Angus and would remarry Henry Stuart, 1st Lord of Methven, on March 3, 1528. Methven would prove to be worse in many respects than Angus, in his desire for both other women and for his wife's money. Margaret died at Methven Castle on October 18, 1541. It is possible she had palsy, resulting from a stroke, on Friday, and died on the following Tuesday. As she thought she would recover, she did not trouble to make a will. She sent for her son, King James V, who was at Falkland Palace, but he did not come in time. Near the end, she wished that the friars who attended her would seek the reconciliation of the king and Earl of Angus. She had hoped that the king would give her possessions to her daughter, Lady Margaret Douglas. James arrived after her death, and he ordered her belongings packed up for his use. Margaret was buried at the Charter House in Perth. It is said her funeral was not elaborate. Margaret Tudor was an exceptionally strong and complex queen, mother, sister, and daughter. Her bloodline survives to this day through her son, King James V. However, the male line of the Tudors ended with Queen Elizabeth I.